"Excuse me, can you spare $1?" The voice was small, hesitant, yet it carried a weight that made Melania stop in her tracks. She turned toward the source and saw a boy, no older than 10, sitting on the sidewalk with a small cardboard sign next to him. The sign read, "Hungry and alone. Please help." The boy's name was Chris. His clothes were worn and too thin for the weather. His face was pale with exhaustion, and his brown eyes had a dullness to them as if life had drained him of hope. Next to him was a small, crumpled backpack, his only possession. For a moment, Melania stood frozen, the noise of the city fading into the background. She had seen homelessness before, but something about this boy struck her deeply. This wasn't just poverty. It was abandonment, a life teetering on the edge. She approached, crouching down to meet Chris at eye level. "What's your name?" she asked softly. The boy hesitated, as if unsure whether to trust her. "Chris," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Melania nodded. "Chris, where's your family? Are you out here by yourself?" Chris lowered his head, gripping the straps of his backpack tightly. "My dad. He's gone. And my mom." His voice cracked. "She left me here. She said she'd come back, but she didn't." Melania's chest tightened. She sat down on the cold sidewalk beside him, ignoring the stares of passers-by. "How long have you been out here?" she asked. Chris shrugged. "A few days? I don't know. I get hungry, and I don't know what else to do." Melania's mind raced. She had spent years living in comfort, shielded from the harsher realities of life. But now, face to face with a boy who had lost everything, she felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility. "You're not alone anymore, Chris," Melania said firmly. "We'll figure this out together." Chris looked up at her, confused. "Why are you helping me? Nobody else stops." Melania smiled gently. "Because sometimes we just need someone to listen. And because you deserve better than this." She reached into her purse and handed Chris a $20 bill. But she knew money wasn't enough. She had resources, connections, and the ability to make a real difference, and she was determined to use them. As Chris clutched the bill tightly, Melania pulled out her phone. "Chris, I'm going to make a few calls. There's someone I know who can help us find your mom and make sure you're safe." Chris hesitated. "But my mom doesn't care. She doesn't want me." Melania placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "I don't believe that, Chris. Sometimes people lose their way, but it doesn't mean they stop loving you. Let me try, okay?" Chris nodded slowly, tears welling in his eyes. For the first time in days, he felt a glimmer of hope. Melania spent the next hour with Chris, sitting beside him on the cold sidewalk while waiting for help to arrive. Passers-by occasionally glanced their way, but no one stopped. The noise of the city faded into the background as she focused entirely on the boy's story. Chris opened up hesitantly, his voice shaking as he revealed the painful truth of his life. His father had died in a car accident 2 years ago, leaving his mother, Jessica, to care for him alone. But after losing her husband, Jessica spiraled into addiction, numbing her pain with substances that eventually consumed her life. "She wasn't always like that," Chris said, clutching his tattered backpack. "She used to take care of me, tell me bedtime stories, and make pancakes every Sunday. But after Dad, she stopped smiling. Then one day, she started yelling more, staying out all night. And then she just left me here." Melania's heart ached as she listened. It was a story of loss and brokenness, but she could see in Chris's eyes that he still loved his mother despite everything. A black SUV pulled up to the curb, and a woman stepped out, Melania's trusted contact. She knelt beside Chris with a kind smile. "We're going to help you, Chris," she said softly. "We'll make sure you're safe." Chris looked at Melania, fear flashing in his eyes. "You're not leaving, are you?" Melania crouched beside him, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "I'm staying. We're going to figure this out together." As they drove to a temporary shelter, Melania quietly made more phone calls. She wasn't going to stop at helping Chris. She was going to find Jessica and try to reunite their family. Hours later, Melania received an update. Jessica had been found in a rundown motel on the edge of the city. She was reluctant to meet, distrustful of anyone claiming to help. "She doesn't believe anyone cares," the social worker told Melania over the phone. Melania thought for a moment before replying, "I need to talk to her myself." The next morning, Melania arrived at the motel. Jessica looked much older than her age, her face lined with the toll of grief and addiction. "What do you want?" she asked defensively. "I'm here because of Chris," Melania said gently. "He's safe now, and he wants to see you." Jessica froze, her expression shifting from suspicion to something unreadable. "Chris, you found him?" "He's been waiting for you," Melania continued. "But before you see him, I want to help you get better, for him and for yourself." Jessica shook her head, tears filling her eyes. "I can't. I've already failed him. He's better off without me." Melania stepped closer, her voice steady but filled with compassion. "You're his mother. He loves you. It's not too late. Let us help you." Jessica hesitated, torn between fear and hope. Finally, she nodded. "I don't know how to fix this." "You don't have to do it alone," Melania replied. "We'll take it one step at a time." And so, a journey of healing began. One that would not only reunite a mother and son, but also prove that kindness, when given freely, could change lives forever.